I like this question from the Daniel Hemry. He asks, Notre Dame pass protection. Did you talk about that yet? I didn't, to be honest with you. I think Notre Dame on the offensive line is in a really good position to be able to participate. And by participate, I mean come in and really kind of control this game on the offensive line. And control maybe isn't the perfect word, but manage this game on the offensive line. Certainly Ohio State, so they've got defensive line guys that I would like on Notre Dame. Okay. And so I'm not saying that those guys aren't going to make plays, but I think where Notre Dame, when Notre Dame hasn't been as good, when Notre Dame has struggled against a Cincinnati last year, when they've struggled in some of these big games, it's been because, in recent memory, it's been because some of these offensive line groups that Notre Dame has had have not been as good. And so, I don't know. I think that Notre Dame's offensive line is the best it's been in recent memory. Bringing back, part of their struggles last year was the offensive line. The good part about that was that they got to play a lot of guys and see what a lot of guys had. Left tackle Joe Alt was kind of a guy that you wouldn't have expected to be a guy that played a lot last year, but got to play a lot because of the injury to Blake Fisher in the first game. Blake Fisher, before he got injured against Florida State, looked really good, was advertised as being really good, is going to play that right tackle position. Josh Lugg has been at Notre Dame seemingly forever. He's going to start at that right guard. Zeke Correll was one of the better offensive linemen for Notre Dame last year at the center spot. I'm sorry. Well, I should say that Zeke Correll played some of the guard spot. Jarrett Patterson was the center last year, has moved to left guard. There was talk about Jarrett Patterson, had he come out, would have been a first or second round draft pick, moving to left guard to maybe maximize his potential there. As far as the NFL is concerned. So if Patterson plays, I feel really good. Now, Patterson's been banged up through camp. And so that could be a major thing to watch. If big number 55 is out there at left guard and he's effective for Notre Dame, that's going to be big. If you have to play somebody else, it's not the end of the world necessarily, because I think Notre Dame recruits the offensive line and has offensive line depth that's really good. But certainly your best offensive lineman, Jarrett Patterson, not being at 100% doesn't help the situation. Do you think Marcus Freeman is the kind of coach who will make excuses if Notre Dame takes an L? I think he will. I don't know. We will see who Marcus Freeman is. I don't think he made any excuses about the loss in the bowl game. And I wouldn't even contend that was very much his fault. I don't know. Question about Al Washington. Is Al Washington thought of a great coach due to recent recruiting because he kind of sucked at Ohio State, according to It's Just Me, Tim 79. I think that has a lot to do with it, the recruiting, to be honest. Again, Ohio State fans, correct me if I'm wrong. Al Washington was coaching the linebackers last year, and I know linebackers were a big bone of contentment when talking about Ohio State's defense and how good it could and should have been, and wasn't necessarily. He's coaching defensive line at Notre Dame, and I think he's has a better home there, to be honest with you. So that sort of remains to be seen. So far, nothing but good things, in my opinion, from Al Washington. Getting into some comments here. Michigan State fan, I'm going to throw this up here. The one thing I like about the Ohio State Notre Dame game is the fact that it's a campus game, not a neutral site game, like most of the high-profile Week 1 games. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I live about an hour and a half away from Columbus, and I've lived closer or further away. Went to school in Dayton at different points in my life. And I've never been to a game at the Shoe. And I will be at this particular game at the Shoe on Saturday night. When this game was scheduled, however many years back, I said I can't wait till 2022 till I can get to the shoot and watch Notre Dame Ohio State. So I'm going to try to appreciate it. I've never even been to, obviously Notre Dame hasn't played at the shoe. You would think that just living in Ohio and being a college football fan, I would have gone to even just, on a Notre Dame bye week, gone to an Ohio State game at some point. Believe me, I've thought about it, but I'm looking forward to a game at the shoe and seeing what the tradition at Ohio State is like. And obviously, it's, as this Michigan State fan has brought up, great that it's an on-campus game. I love that as well. Even more excited, arguably, for Notre Dame hosting Ohio State next year. I believe that's a game in week 2. Great question here. How many tickets for Notre Dame fans? 20%. I think Notre Dame fans are going to come out to this one. Ohio is, there's a lot of Notre Dame fans in Ohio. When you talk about, all the Catholic schools around Cleveland and Cincinnati, I think that there's a really good chance that that Notre Dame has a big showing out for this particular one. I'm trying to catch up on a couple of these conversations. One thing I don't hear much is that both teams are breaking in new defensive coordinators. Unfortunately, Notre Dame is also breaking in a new QB, new head coach, and a lot of new staff members. I buy that. I also buy the fact that, Marcus Freeman came in, put in his defense. For lots of intents and purposes, I think that Marcus Freeman is still sort of the defensive coordinator because he's just a defensive guy. Now, that doesn't mean that Al Golden, hasn't done his things, that use his terminology, so on and so forth. Al Golden's done this for a long time. I just think that I wouldn't make a big deal about, Ohio State's defensive coordinator either. I don't think that new coaches in this particular instance for either team is as much of an impact as I think some people are making it. These guys have coached a lot of football. Certainly there is the factor that Marcus Freeman, has never been a head coach before, never been the guy on the headset to make the call of I'm going for it on 4th and 1, or, we got the ball back with 5.5 minutes. Are we going into kind of a stall offense to try to score right before halftime with a few seconds left? Am I just running my regular, situational football? Marcus Freeman hasn't had to coach through those situations as much as, Ryan Day has. Let's just say that. However, again, Al Golden is a former head coach, has coached through a lot of situations. And what I know about Marcus Freeman is that he's not dumb and that he's going to really prepare heavily and have an idea, have no stone unturned in terms of what he's doing in terms of, this football game. Gary, I appreciate this comment. He says, I like the video, listening and learning during the show. I appreciate that very much. Brian Myers, he says, make sure you hit the skull session. That's one thing that I do hope to get to. Again, I've heard plenty about Ohio State football and their traditions and things. And so, I live in Ohio. Most of my friends are Ohio State fans. I'll be honest with you. In fact, I'm going to the game with 2 other friends and their wives who are all Ohio State fans. And then it'll be me and my girlfriend who are Notre Dame fans. And even so, my girlfriend's a Notre Dame fan purely because I am. So, David Wood, I think at this point we've got a lot of Ohio State fans asking about Notre Dame, which is fine, which is good. Says, what's up with Notre Dame losing recruits? NIL had a little bit to do with some of the recent ones that they've lost. Even though Notre Dame's lost a couple of recruits, I assume the one that most people are still thinking about is Keon Keeley, defensive end, edge rusher, outside linebacker, whatever you want to call him, potentially decommitting and potentially going to Alabama. Marcus Freeman has to coach some football before I think he gets to his best recruiting classes, to be honest with you. So I don't know. I think NIL has to get regulated a little bit for Notre Dame to really truly be on a level playing field because, from what I understand, Notre Dame doesn't give guaranteed money. But I think that I think that Notre Dame's right there. And then once Marcus Freeman proves that he can either at least maintain what Brian Kelly kind of built up and build on it and, close the gap by recruiting, so on and so forth. I think that that's where Notre Dame takes the jump. But again, Marcus Freeman has to coach some football games before that actually happens.